Russia tricked Germany into into removing many of their very best military officers. And it's possible that Russia is attempting to fool President Trump into doing the same today in the United States. So in 1990, I was in the Marines. I was a student at the Defense Language Institute, and a staff sergeant in the Marines told me, he said, listen, they're teaching this night class down at the base of the hill. He said, you can walk down there every night and go to class. You should take this course. It's being taught by this former Romanian intelligence officer who had defected from the USSR. I enrolled in the course, and sure enough, this guy was amazing. He told was how Lenin came into power. Lenin went out and killed many of the most influential, most powerful naval officers, military officers, and like more than 90% of all of the generals, the colonels, he took out. Even the vast majority of the battalion commanders. Lenin just erased them. So suddenly, this massive Russian army is without any leadership, which means that it could be much more easily overwhelmed by a foreign army. So for hundreds of years, there has been a standing animosity between the Germans and the Russians. So their biggest concern was Germany. So this is what the Russians did. Now this guy was a high-ranking intelligence officer, and he either heard about it or was involved with it. I don't remember exactly, but this is what the Russians did. They knew who one of the German spies was inside the USSR. So what they did was they just let mention in front of this guy, hey, we have a list of high-ranking German officers who are loyal to communism. So this German agent sends notice back to Germany, hey, there are high-ranking German officers who are secretly loyal to Moscow, to the communists. So the Germans, of course, say, we need to find out who these men are. We need to get this list. So they go and they use their agent, and this guy starts asking around about the list. And so the Russians, of course, they're running this guy. They're running this German agent. They know he's a German agent, and they say, well, no one can access this list. This list is like impossible to get to. Only a very few select people have it. It's impossible. So they give the Germans the runaround. So the Germans have to work hard for it. Because understand, if it was easily acquired, if it had come quickly, why would they believe it? No. People don't trust what comes easy. So the Germans start working hard. Man, we've got to get this list. We have to find out who are the enemy amongst our own ranks. So eventually, they start working one of the Russians who supposedly has access to this list. And they figure out that they make a deal with this guy to pay him $1 million. Now, this is in the 30s. I do not remember the exact date of this, and I tried to find it. It is not in the history books, but this guy, he told us, like, this is what happened. Now, it's clear. It's called The Great Purge. You can see this page I'm on here for this video, The Great Purge, and that part is very clear in history. Now, aside from the Night of the Long Knives, I cannot find the part where Germany kills off a bunch of their own officers or removes a bunch of their own officers or scrubs their own. If you find it, please leave a comment, because I need to find that to prove that this whole story is true. So they say, give me $1 million and I'll give you the list. So the Germans send in, the Germans first say no, they try to negotiate, the guy doesn't budge, right? Because the Russians understand, in order to get the Germans to believe this, in order for them to believe it, they have to pay a high price. And they have to pay such a high price that when we give them the list, they won't be able to deny it, or else it means admitting that they were deceived. And people are often too arrogant or just don't want to lose their careers. What a career-destroying blunder it would be, right, to pay $1 million for trash. So they don't budge on the $1 million, right? And so the Germans send in their guy with $1 million. They meet the guy, and the guy takes the $1 million, gives him an envelope with a list of names in it. So now this whole time, what the Russians are doing is they're trying to assess who are the most dangerous, who are the most talented, intelligent, smart German officers that we would like to see removed. and they're figuring out who these men are, and they're creating a list of the most important German men who are running the military and the government in Germany. And that's whose names they're putting on the list. So this guy gives them the list, and he says, listen, I was followed here. You've got to move fast or else they're going to catch you. So the German agent runs off. Well, the German agent makes contact with his German comrades, and he hands off the paper and says, listen, some people are following me, and I know they're following me, so you've got to move quickly. Well, as soon as they get the handoff, they immediately kill that German agent. So they kill the man, and then they start pursuing the new team that's taken possession of the list. And they let the team, now the Russians the whole time know where this group is. And they're following them, they're tracking them, and they wait until they get to the border, and then they capture them and kill this other German team. So now the Germans have spent $1 million, and they've also lost a key asset they had high up in the German government, inside the Soviet government, and they've also lost some other assets. So they have blood and money and resources and a lot of time, because the Russians have been dragging this out. So now the Germans have to come up with a second guy who's going to sell them the list. They bring in some other kind of a bribe, and now they get the list again. And this time, the Russians, they repeat the whole chase scene, car chases, shootouts, everything, but they let the Germans get away. So now the Germans believe, wow, the Russians, they really wanted this. They really wanted to get it back, but this time we outsmarted them, and now we have the list. So they open up the list, and the Germans say, wow, these are some of our best guys. But for sure this is true. These guys are communists. And so they remove all those guys. Now, why is that a concern for Americans right now? Because there's this whole thing with QAnon and these sealed indictments, and supposedly Trump has had these meetings with Vladimir Putin, and we don't know what it's about, but there has been rumors, there's been scuttlebutt that Putin is helping Trump figure out who are these pedophiles, these international pedophiles, these cannibals, these people with these rings, these places underground. And if he's getting information from the Russians, there's every chance that the Russians are giving them some real names, but also putting in some names of people who aren't involved in any way. And then America's going to come and purge out some of our top-ranking. Now, I don't trust any American general. And my understanding is those guys are all vetted. They must be approved by Congress, and the Satanists claim that they control all of Congress. So the Satanists get to pick the generals. That means I don't trust them. And I've even read horror stories about people who saw some American generals doing different wicked things and how people have been killed to hide their actions and things like this. So I don't trust any generals, but maybe some colonels, majors, captains, most certainly there's no reason to not trust them. So the Russians are probably figuring out who has the best training, who's the biggest threat to us, who speaks Russian, for example, and they're probably putting those names on the list. So I'll tell you what, if you hear this message and you're in the United States government, you're involved with this thing, you know what? Look at who's on that list, whose removal would be a great advantage to Russia, and make sure you are perfectly detailed and without error in researching whether or not that person really was involved with pedophilia, really was involved with the deep state, really was involved with cannibalism, or whatever else the Russians are going to say they did. Don't trust a list that you get from Russia. This is the man from Modesto warning you as always to pray or be defeated. Because you know what? If you have some doubt about who is some man, God knows. God knows the heart of every man on this planet, and he can tell you. So you pray. Wow, is this list corrupt? Is our resources corrupt? Are we being played? Always pray about everything you do, everything. In this time and age, there's so much deception. You must pray. And that's why the Holy Spirit gave me these powerful words. Pray or be defeated.